You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Good to have you this week, and we're going to start off with a good one. I mean, they're all good, but you know, we all know that we're living on borrowed time, essentially. You know, average lifespan keeps pushing up, and that's great. You know, I want to be an old man. That's kind of the goal, but we're not guaranteed anything. You know, my younger sister lost her at 40. You know, and I have friends that didn't get out of high school. You know, how do we look at mortality? What do we do with the time we have? Probably even a better question. Well, today's guest, unfortunately, has to face that very real situation as a diagnosis. Elijah Stacy is today's guest, and he was diagnosed several years ago with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, and he'll tell us a little bit about that. But that's not a diagnosis for a long life from a medical standpoint. But, you know, sometimes you got to just ignore the doctors and do what you're put on this earth to do, and that's what he's doing, and it's a fabulous story. He has a book out. I'll show you the book, just dropped late last year. It's called A Small If, and you're going to want to hear that story. So stick around, hit share, hit like, hit subscribe, hit follow. Tell your friends, because this is an inspirational one. Elijah, thank you for being with us on Life Today Live.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right, I guess let's start from the top. We saw you. I don't know if you could tell. You guys, I showed you. Here's the book cover. Are you in the wheelchair on the cover of that book? It looks like it.
Yes, yeah, I'm sitting down.
Okay, so explain your diagnosis, just so we have sort of that foundation of where you're coming from.
Sure. So Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy is a fatal muscle wasting disease that eats away a person's muscles as time goes on. So when I was 6 years old, I was walking on my tippy toes. I was falling to the floor frequently. I was not able to keep up with my peers on the playground. I was getting fatigued real easily. And then eventually I'd become so weak at age 11 that I'd be completely dependent on a power wheelchair as I lost my ability to walk. Then when you're in your later teenage years, you start to lose mobility in your arms, and that's really challenging. You know, putting a shirt on, raising your hand in class to answer a question, you know, those are things that get a lot harder to do or nearly impossible to do. And then the worst part about the disease is it's a fatal disease. Most patients pass away when they're 25. So I'm 20 years old. Most patients pass away when they're 25. So, you know, it's a real serious thing. And the reason that is because your heart and your diaphragm are muscles too, and those will be attacked since it's a muscle wasting disease.
Mm-hmm. I have a friend who has muscular dystrophy. And, you know, the diagnosis for her was not good, not 25, but like 30, between 30 and 35, I think. She's older than me, and I'm in my 50s. So I've seen people, I mean, I know people who are beating the odds, as it were. What's your frame of mind when you get up every day?
Well, I mean, it just depends on the day, but I mean, in general, yeah, in general, you know, my frame of mind is I'm the type of person that wants to have a productive day every single day. If I don't have a productive day, I feel like I wasted it. Now, there's days where I like to relax and do fun things, sure, but mainly I like to do things that are productive and that are going to leave an impact. And something I've been thinking about a lot lately personally is like, well, I can make an impact on this earth, and that's all great and everything, but I want to now focus a lot of my time and attention on doing things that will leave an internal impact, right? And I find that very fulfilling. So really, I get up with the frame of mind of, you know, okay, what can I do today that's going to be impactful, that's going to create a better future for me, for other people, and, you know, and something that would be pleasing to God.
Before we talk about the book, which is something designed to reach a wide audience, and I hope it just goes crazy for you, by the way, you mentioned something before we started that you're doing tonight to reach a small group of people. And I'm reminded with what you just said of how when one person comes to Christ, all of heaven rejoices. Now, I don't know if you thought about that, but all of heaven rejoicing is a pretty stinking huge thing. And it's just when one lost person comes to Christ. Tell people what you're doing tonight, and I'm curious why you spend your time doing that.
Right. So tonight I'm running a Bible study. I've been running it in my backyard for about a year and a half now, nearly every single Monday. We basically took probably, I don't know, 10 weeks off in about a year and a half. So it's pretty consistent. But we have about, a regular 15, 20, sometimes 35 people. That was when it's at its peak. Coming in, they're from, my age, around 20, 18 to 22, 25. But, we have a pastor who comes who's in his 50s. We have other pastors that are coming now as well. All kinds of people come, theological students, non-believers come. They like to challenge us. But this Bible study is really focused on reading the actual word and trying to figure out what it means. And it's really about trying to bring people closer to God. And so I teach lessons and give sermons and help my peers get closer to God. And one of the major things I think that my generation needs is a stronger focus on apologetics, to focus on the intellectual side of God. And there's a lot of arguments for the existence of God that prove his existence, in my opinion. We can look at the cosmological argument about, the beginning of the universe, and that the cause of the universe would have to be timeless, immaterial, personal, because the only persons decided to create things, things like that. Or we could look at the moral argument for the existence of gods, which says that in order for objective morality to be a thing in reality, it has to have an anchor point, right? It have to be God. It have to be something that transcends all culture. And that's if morality is objective. That's not to say that a person can't be good if they don't believe in God. It's to say that only good can exist if there is a God. And we know intuitively that there is good. And so I think that these arguments are really powerful. And then, we could look at arguments for specifically Christianity, such as the resurrection. And when you really look at that and you look at all the alternatives, which is what I encourage free thought. I encourage debate. I encourage people to come and challenge us. We really do see that, no, God really is real, and that Jesus is the Son of God, and that it just makes sense to put our faith in him and to follow him. And that's really why I started the Bible study. And, we have people record it, and we try to put that out for more people to see it. And it's just really great to see young people come back. And here's my last point on this, because I'm pretty passionate about this, is I think that America has a lot of problems and the way our country is going. And I think that truly the only way that we can get our country to return back is really through faith, is really through God. And the reason I say that is because a huge part of the Bible is the family unit, right? About how a mother and a father should raise their kids, and how children should respect their parents, and that family unit. And I really think that is key. That is key. And we could see that statistically. We could see the stats on this of, kids that don't have two parents, and what happens, higher crime rates, a higher risk of teen pregnancy, higher risk of suicide. I mean, all these things are higher. And, when you have two parents, it really fixes a lot of the problems that we have today, including economic ones, right? Two paychecks are better than one. And so I really, really think that we need to get back to God. And I think that a lot of the problems we see today would go away. And really it comes down to building stronger families. And I think the only way to do that is through a strong biblical presence.
I love that you love apologetics, but there's a little bit of irony here, because as you probably know, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, objections to the existence of God is not as much an intellectual one as an emotional one, and that goes to the problem of suffering.
Yes.
Which you do.
Yes.
And you talk about the family. This is not just something you're going through alone. Tell us a little bit about your family, your brothers, what you guys have been through.
Right. So my family, two of my other brothers also have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. My brother Max, he was 14 years old. He had Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but he had other health complications, which made him confined to a bed his whole life, blind, cognitively delayed, not able to talk, feeding tube, full-time nurse. And he unfortunately, he passed away when he was 14, but, he's in heaven now. And so see him again one day. My little brother Max, that's my little brother Max. My little brother Kai, he also has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he's 14, and he's in 8th grade. And so he's in a power wheelchair today, but he's someone that likes to laugh and have fun and play video games and mess around. That's Kai. But that would be my family. But you mentioned that, I'm into apologetics, and the problem of suffering. That's a big problem that people have is, if God is all good and all loving and all powerful, why does he allow suffering? But there really isn't a logical contradiction there on paper, but it's really, like you said, the emotional side, and why would God do that? But one of the things, and I want to touch on this because I think this is important. I think that the beautiful thing about Christianity and about the Bible is that suffering doesn't need to be looked at as something that we want to go away. I mean, let's not be crazy and think that we want suffering. We don't necessarily want suffering.
Right.
We could see that suffering could be for our ultimate good. I know this to be true in my life, that because I'm suffering, it has built my character up. It's made me way more dependent on God. And I don't think I would be this close to God if I, was just completely healthy, super rich, and had everything. It's when you have challenges in life, that's when you call up to God the most. And I think that suffering is a beautiful thing that God will allow happen to people in order to draw them closer to Him. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said something along the lines that God uses suffering and challenges to arouse a deaf world. And so, I have no problem with suffering. I think it's a powerful thing that, you take someone like me with a terrible disease, a fatal disease, in a wheelchair, all these challenges, and yet I still love God. I think that's a powerful messenger for God. And so, I hope people could see that just because you have challenges and problems in your life, it's no reason not to put your trust in God.
Tough question. Do you or do your parents pray for healing?
Oh, yes. I've been praying for healing just lately, actually. I mean, I never have when I was a little kid or anything like that. I mean, maybe here and there, my parents probably have. But
Yeah.
lately, people at the Bible study and me, it's starting to be put on my heart to pray for healing. And I don't know in which way God wants me to or what it means, but I definitely feel called to pray for healing a lot lately. And so I'm going to continue to do so and see where God takes that.
Now, at the same time, and I love this approach, pray for healing, trust God for the outcome regardless, because, I'm sure, I know you know this, when you're facing this kind of situation, you start to take a more eternal perspective, and you realize that we're worried about, the dot when God's worried about the line, that goes on. And so, I want to keep things in perspective, but yeah, I would pray for healing too. I mean, I pray for healing for my sister. Anytime, somebody gets COVID, I pray for healing, right? At the same time, you've got a foundation to look at the scientific side of Duchenne and try to find a solution there. I'm really curious your philosophy behind that, and then some of the practicality of the foundation you started at 15, right?
Right. So I started Duchenne, as you said, at 15 years old. And this I'm really into business and really passionate about entrepreneurship. I love this stuff. Marketing, great. And so that's, I wanted to do something great for the world. And I thought that by curing my disease or trying to use my situation to advance science would be a way to do so. So I started Duchenne, and the whole mission of Duchenne is to advance gene editing and gene therapy into human practice. To complete the cure for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. But by advancing the science, it's going to advance science for other diseases as well, other genetic diseases in particular. And what I believe about it is, I believe that God allows treatments to happen in order to alleviate suffering. And I think that's just one way that God allows healing to happen. I believe that God is a sovereign God, and he's in control. And so he's allowing these things to happen. And I think it's a beautiful thing. But I'm really big on gene editing, really big on gene therapy. I believe that we're entering the golden age of medicine. And I want to do everything I can to help usher it in.
What is gene editing? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so gene editing, basically what it allows us to do is it allows us to edit our DNA like it's a piece of text in a Word document. And we can fix the spelling errors, because with me, for Duchenne, for example, I have a mutation in my DNA code. And if we could just change that spelling error, we can then fix it, and I would no longer have Duchenne. And we've been able to do that in mice. We've been able to do that in dogs, and it's worked. We've been able to stop Duchenne in them. And I know that people may pose, the ethical debate about that. So I'd like to touch on that right now. And what I would say to that is, I think that people should be concerned about, using gene editing for the wrong purposes. And that makes sense. I would agree with that. But when it comes to curing diseases, I think that if we were to not use gene editing, I think that that would be immoral, because if we have a cure for someone suffering and we choose not to use it, I think that's wrong. And so I think that we have to be smart and use this correctly and ethically. But I definitely think that it's within ethical means to use gene editing to alleviate people's suffering, such as if they have Duchenne or some other type of genetic disease, or even forms of cancer, because we've been able to show we could use this technology for cancer as well.
So interesting, because the way my simple mind works is, I am against. I don't even think that recreational drug use should be legalized. So I'm even over there. Certainly think that drug abuse is terrible and destructive, and we should not endorse it. We should help people who are in that situation. But when they were putting titanium plates in my face after an accident, I was very glad to have the drugs. So to me, it was, how do you use what we know, what we've got? And so I don't understand all the complexities of, genetics and gene editing and things like that. But if God's going to allow us the knowledge to alleviate human suffering, I mean, I think you're in the right place.
I think that what I would say about that is it reminds me of, like my study of, studying ethics and stuff. It's kind of like when it comes to protecting your house. For example, if you use a gun to go in and just kill somebody on the street randomly, that would be wrong. But if somebody comes into your house and they're trying to harm your family, as the leader of the house, I think that you should try and protect your family. I think that's the right thing to do. So it's not, a gun's not good or bad. It depends on the situation. It could be both. It's the same thing with, certain, sexual ethics, for example. You should only do that within marriage. Before marriage would be wrong, but within marriage would be correct. So it's not the action itself that's wrong. It's the use of it. It's where you're using it at.
All right. Elijah Stacy settling the Second Amendment debate. Thank you for that. No, I want to show you the book because it's called A Small If, and the title actually has a really fabulous story behind it. The book's available now, Amazon, probably lots of other better places, but wherever you want to buy your books, you can pick up A Small If now and really get into the detail and see the amazing story of this incredible young man. But Elijah, explain the title and the story behind that, because I want people to hear that.
Right. So A Small If, the official title of the book, right? It's a really cool story, and it really kind of explains my life in a lot of ways. So I was going to the doctors when I was 16 years old to do an x-ray on my back, my orthopedic doctor. And I got off the x-ray table and my spine was curved. And that's a problem, right? Because, they're saying, well, my doctor's saying that you're going to need a metal rod inserted into your back. We're going to have to correct the scoliosis, and you're going to have this really intense surgery that I do not want, right? I do not want a metal rod inserted into my back. I look over to my left. My mom's crying. My doctor's handing her a tissue. I look and I see my dad. He's got his head down. That's what he does when he's sad. I'm sitting there smiling because I am not accepting this news. I am not going to have the surgery. I will not have it. I'm not accepting it. I don't believe it. So I'm smiling because I'm not accepting the news. So I'm going back and forth with my doctor saying, what if I chose not to have it? He said, you could do that, but as your doctor, I got to put my foot down and advocate for you to have the surgery. And we're just not going anywhere. And he's going, into detail. He's saying that we'll have a great team of doctors. He's naming their names, getting really specific. Saying we'll do it during the summertime to avoid the flu season. All these things. And he's basically planning the surgery right here. He's like basically scheduling it. And I'm like, okay, he's really serious. And then asked him, I said, well, let's just say, if I was somehow able to reverse the current state of my spine, could I avoid having to have the surgery then? He says, well, it's basically medically impossible. I've never seen anybody do it. I don't want to give you any false hope. And as your doctor, I got to put my foot down and advocate for you to have the surgery. But because I know you, I will give you a small if. That's all I need to hear. A small if. Okay. So from that day forward, I started losing weight because I wanted to, I thought getting healthier would be good, maybe alleviate some of the pressure off my spine. I started working out every single day at my house. I hung a picture of my curved spine on my bedroom wall so I'd wake up and know what I have to focus on that day. And one of the major keys is I went to physical therapy and did intense stretching. I mean, sometimes it hurt so bad that I'd bite down on my shirt. And what I would think about is I wanted to correct my spine. I wanted to do the so-called impossible or the improbable more than I cared about the pain, right? So I wanted it bad, right? And so you're willing to tolerate the pain in order to get your desired outcome. So 3 months later, go back to the doctor and do the x-ray, and I'm fired up. I mean, people probably looked at me crazy, but keep in mind I was raised by a head football coach, so I have that athlete's mindset ingrained in me. But I'm like, I got off the x-ray table, I'm like clapping my hands, I'm like, that's straighter, that's straighter. I go inside the room and I'm looking at the x-ray, and I'm like, and I get in there and I'm recording myself, and I'm looking up at the x-ray, I'm like, that's straighter, that's definitely straighter, that's straighter. And then the doctor comes in, and it's all business. He's looking at the x-ray, I'm not talking, I'm just sitting there in silence, smiling, right? And he looks around, he's like, your spine is definitely straighter. He's like, you did it, he gave me knuckles. And I thought, let's go, I did the classic Tom Brady, let's go, right? So I was all fired up. And later that day I went to Newport Beach and got a shake at my favorite Shake Shack to celebrate, because for that whole 3-month period, I didn't eat any sweets. I swore them off. I even taught myself how to cook, right? Because I was trying to lose weight. It's funny. I would be driving my wheelchair in one hand and carrying the pan in the other hand, and meal prepping. So I even learned how to do that. I was doing everything I could to do it. And I would visualize, right? I'd visualize myself pulling this off, and I'd visualize how good it would feel. And I even visualized myself drinking that shake. So it's a big part of the story, because just like I visualized from 3 months ago to the final day, it happened.
That I can hardly even. I mean, none of us can relate, right? Because I'm gonna take that small if against the doctor's advice and straighten my own spine to avoid having a metal rod put in my back. That's some kind of attitude. I mean, that's some kind of admirable attitude, right? But this is what you've got in the midst of bad, what's plural of diagnosis? Diagnoses, right? What do you look for in the future, man? What's your long range plan?
How long you got? That's I could talk about that forever. I'm a long-term thinker for sure, but I mean, well, there's a lot of things that I want to do, right? There's a lot of things I want to do. I want to write more books. I want to give more public speeches. I want to advance science. I want to cure this disease. I want to advance the kingdom. I'm very interested in ministry. I'm even interested in running for public office one day. I want to make things better. I guess more on the personal side, I want to be married. I want to have a family. I think that's one of the most beautiful things, when you have two people who love God so much, and then they come together to become one flesh. I think that's one of the most beautiful things. It resembles our relationship with God, right? When you do it right, and that's beautiful. And I want to be a model for people, because I think today, divorces in America, I mean, it's I think the statistics now is you're likely to get divorced, and that's tragic. I think when you say your vows, till death we depart, like, do you really mean that, right? Do you promise God that you're going to do that? So I want to be a model of that. And I think in my situation, it would be really cool, because, if you see somebody in a wheelchair, with somebody, and they're married and they have a happy, loving marriage. And I think that would really show people what true love is. That's loving like Christ, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things I want to do and accomplish, and I feel like I'm just getting started, to be honest.
I love it. The website I want to show you right here, it looks like this. It's Elijah J. Stacy. J stands for John. I had to ask him that. ElijahJStacy.com. I'll put that in the chat for you guys that are chat enabled, and you can check out what's going on with him. But one thing about the book, Elijah, is that it's not just about you. It's the things that you have learned through intense suffering and through a medically dim outlook, but yet a positive outlook through your faith in God. you are relating these things you have learned to everybody. What is it that you're really wanting people to hear from you?
Overcome their suffering. That's what I want people to hear from me is, you got to overcome your suffering. You mentioned, there's 13 life lessons in the book that I go into detail about things that could help people overcome their suffering, become mentally tougher, and live a more fulfilling, purposeful, meaningful life, right? And that's what I want. When people come across me, I want them to feel hopeful. I want them to feel confident. I want them to feel bold. I want them to feel, like they can overcome their adversity in their life. I want them to feel like they can do anything they put their mind to and truly believe it, not just say it, but actually feel it, believe they can, because I'm someone that really does believe that. I think that with enough time and enough effort, we could basically do anything, God willing. And that's what I think that's the biggest takeaways. I want people to overcome their suffering. That's something I'm huge on.
Well, and it's not just something that you're preaching, it's something you're living. And that's huge, man. So you keep doing what you're doing. You keep pursuing God and giving him the glory. And I got to tell you, man, you're an inspiration to all of us. I appreciate your time, appreciate your story. I got to ask you one last question because you mentioned football and being a football fan. Who you got in the Super Bowl?
Oh, this has been crazy, these games.
I know.
I'm probably going to go Chiefs.
Got to say Rams. You're in LA, man. You got to say Rams.
I mean, I could say who I want, but I don't know if it's going to be, I think the Niners, unfortunately, are going to be in the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be the Niners and the Chiefs. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah. And then I think Chiefs are going to take it all. I think the Chiefs are going to take it all this year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. My heart was broken for Josh Allen last night. But all right,
yeah.
We digress. You guys, thanks again, Elijah. I really do appreciate you, man. Appreciate you guys hanging out, watching Live Today Live. Share this with somebody. I mean, these are deep issues, and God just gives us, I think, the privilege of talking to people like Elijah, just to kind of reorient us and inspire us. And just look for that one small if. Pick up the book, wherever books are sold, and check out his website. We'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
If we have life, it is according to the mercy of God. If we have providence to guide us, it is God's mercy. The same for you, the same for every man, Jew and Gentile and Mohammedan, whether they believe it or not. We float on this vast, limitless sea of divine mercy.